All right, all right. I'm here. What's up, everybody? I see the conversation once again in the chat about me being late. Look, we all know this. I tell you guys every single time. And actually, I would make the case that I build anticipation by showing up late because you all show up in the chat. I see the chat get going. Everybody's getting it's like the energy before a concert. You know, when you're waiting at a concert, it never seems to start on time. I love live music, so I go to a lot of shows. Like you'll be there waiting and waiting and waiting. Like, man, when are these dudes supposed to go on? And you just there's like a buzz. Everybody's excited. There's an energy to it. And then all of a sudden, bam, like the band comes out, someone hits a guitar riff or whatever, and then the thing starts, the show starts, and it's like this eruption. Okay. So I would argue that by being late every single time to these shows, I am actually enhancing your experience. And that is how you flip a narrative, my friends. Welcome into the YouTube live show tonight. Obviously, I am John Kurtz. Thank you to those of you that are here. If you have not subscribed to the channel, this is a place where we talk college football, namely Big 12 football each and every week. A lot of conference realignment, obviously, right now. And we are going to cover some of that today. This actually may develop into a bit of a football show, maybe half and half, depending on how much time we have to get to everything. Let me lay out the outline that I have for you. I will give you an update from Pac-12 country, which is a couple of things. Canzano and Wilner both had mailbags within the last week that answered, I think, like honestly, did a pretty good job of answering a lot of people's like frequently asked questions, like some fairly common questions that I see throughout realignment. They addressed a good chunk of that. There was also some news from Pac-12 country, and I mean like actual hard news, and that is that Oregon's president left to go take the job at Northwestern. Not an ideal time if you're Oregon or any school in the Pac-12 to be losing your university president. Now, this was a university president that was said to not be all that involved or particularly interested in athletics, but I read up on what Canzano had to say about it, and even he admitted, stressful times to be replacing a president right now for the University of Oregon. So not ideal for everything happening in the Pac-12 right now, but I'll take you through some of the frequently asked questions that I saw throughout their mailbag that I think are of note to a lot of people around here. One of the things that was addressed there, one of the topics that was addressed there is the fact that one Big 12 team continues to be mentioned in expansion. Whenever expansion is asked about, which, it's still talked about, it seems like about every week by Canzano and Wilner, or asked about by somebody and they'll address it in their mailbag. There is one Big 12 team that continues to come up. And so I do want to talk about that, because it's at least something to have on the back burner. I don't think it's very likely at all, but it's at least something to be thinking about. And this is where some of the Pac-12 conversation can actually work against them, because they want to continue to stress. And I think most of us have gotten to this place where we agree, in general, most people think the monetary value of each conference is going to be relatively similar. And if it is relatively similar, maybe with a bit of an edge to the Big 12 with a Big 12 slant here on this channel, then like why would one of the Big 12 schools want to go through all that trouble to leave to go to the Pac-12 if the money is going to be very similar and you already have a good thing here and a more stable league and one that's not going to have to worry about the Big 10 coming to poach teams within the next 2 to 5 years, et cetera, right? So I don't mean that as any kind of alarm, like cause for panic here that anybody from the Big 12 is leaving. Nothing like that at all. I'm just saying that it is interesting to me. There has been one team that has shown up the most in Pac-12 expansion discussions when talking about the Big 12, and that reared its head once again. I will tease something here. Let me go ahead and let you know that I have 2 videos coming out for you this week that are not live shows. I have a 2-part interview with Bob Thompson, who is the now retired former president of Fox Sports. So the head of Fox Sports, retired, now speaking on a lot of these issues. He's been on Twitter addressing a lot of people's questions about what's happening. He's been inside these rooms before negotiating these things, and he had a lot to say. I straight up asked him, who's going to get more, the Big 12 or the Pac-12? All the questions that we debate all the time here. I had a pretty in-depth, like half-hour-long discussion with him about that. So I'll be releasing the video in 2 parts. You'll get 1 part tomorrow morning and 1 part on Tuesday morning. So you have that to look forward to as well coming up here. I'm glad that I remembered to promo that. When it comes to the actual on-the-field football stuff, man, Texas has had a pretty bad week. I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's going on in Austin, but that much-vaunted offense, the offense that is supposed to be a well-oiled machine, and look, frankly, on paper, it is, has taken some hits to injury and mischief within the last week. And I definitely have some thoughts about that and what it is going to do to the Texas Longhorns coming up this year. And then, hey, look, if we have time for it, I think one of the most compelling things that we get every single year from preseason football magazines actually comes from Athlon, which is a bit of a, I feel like Athlon was more popular before Phil Steele just completely not monopolized, but completely took over like the spotlight of these preseason football magazines. But they have, I think, the best feature of anybody, which is quoting anonymous coaches within the Big 12. And I would like to go through that list at some point on the channel here for a video or a live. Maybe that has to turn into a static video because the lives have been so focused on realignment here lately. But I will get to that if we do have time. Okay, that's the lineup for today. A lot of you guys already have the idea here. But if you want to get involved tonight, the chat is going to be bumping. There are a lot of people in here. So to cut through all that noise, if you want to make sure your question or comment gets on the chat, you can donate by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. When you donate, that ensures that I will read your question or comment on the show. Tax it up at the top for me. If it is more than $5 or more, it will tack it up at the top for me. I still do a pretty good job of catching the $2 donations as well. But that is how you get on the show. That's how you get involved. And not only that, but also support the work that I'm doing and bringing you Big 12 content week in and week out here on the channel. Also, if you could like the video, I would really appreciate that. We've got 229 people in here and only 33 likes. Let's get those likes up, everybody. It's free. Just one click. I'd appreciate it if you do that too. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm, etc. Okay, we've got a couple of donations already, so let me start with those. Joe, thank you for being here as always, my friend, and thank you for contributing and donating to the channel. I really appreciate that. Joe says probably nothing happening until next year. So if we're saying next year is in like next calendar year, right? So we're in August. That'd be like over the next 4 months. I would lean toward nothing major happening. At least in terms of like a school leaving. I would lean toward nothing happening, but I'm kind of going to buy I'm getting him confused now, the John Wilner line. It is John Wilner who continues to use this line, and he says it's a 4.5-point favorite right now that the Pac-12 survives and stays put basically where they're at right now. I would kind of use that same sort of thing, like maybe a 3.5-point favorite. I'll give the little hook there, 3.5-point favorite. That nothing would happen within the next 4 months before we get to the next actual calendar year. But it's just really hard to know. And I go back to the same answer that I preach consistently. It'll hinge on what the Pac-12 finds out about its next TV contract and how they're going to work that out. And there is a pretty important detail about the Pac-12's next TV contract that came from Canzano today that I will read to you actually this weekend. I think his mailbag actually came out yesterday. But Canzano had a very important piece about unequal revenue sharing and the model that the Pac-12 may be trying to employ there. And I have some questions about like how well that would actually be received and if that is going to be enough to appease the powers that be in the Pac-12 conference. So all of that means that there's still plenty on the table there, even in the next 4 months that could happen. It's just a fool's errand, I think, to say like for sure something is going to happen. The only domino that ensures that we would have something happening, I think, within the Pac-12 would be Notre Dame deciding to join the Big Ten, because then I think the Big Ten just says, screw it. We're going to go up and try to take more teams, and a lot of dominoes will fall, and that will just hasten, in some ways, the demise of college football, but hasten our sprint or jog, whatever you want to call it right now, toward two massive leagues, basically the Fox League and the ESPN League. So that's kind of where I feel like it's at, Joe. I would not want to make any kind of emphatic statement about where it's going right now. I guess I could put it that way. Matthew, thank you for the donation. Matthew says, hey, John, how about Skyler in the Dolphins game? Yes. Look, I'll even give a shout out to Brock Purdy too. Okay. I saw Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, throwing a touchdown pass this weekend in a preseason game. My guy, Skylar Thompson, threw a touchdown pass for the Dolphins in their preseason game. I can tell you a fun little story. I was at the lake, as maybe you can tell by some of the sun that I got here. I'm very pale. The sun kills me. But I was at the lake with some of my buddies that I do the 3Ma podcast with, if you're a K-State fan. And we were all sitting around trying. We got the NFL, like whatever their free trial is for their streaming package, is like NFL Plus or something. I didn't even know about it before yesterday. But purely to watch the Dolphins game, because Skylar Thompson played the entire game at quarterback for the Dolphins. And yet it wouldn't work. It was the one game that the NFL app was being clunky with, and it wouldn't work. So we spent like half an hour going through illegal streams and eventually found some on YouTube, but we'd watch for like 20 minutes. It'd get shut down. Then we'd have to find another one. It'd get shut down. I mean, we found a way to watch a lot of Skylar Thompson's game, including the touchdown pass live when it happened, but it was not easy. Shout out to my guy Mason for figuring out how to get us through with the illegal streams on YouTube to watch it. So I starved for football content, and a bunch of us guys that eat, sleep, and breathe Big 12 and K-State football. We were desperate for it yesterday, and we found a way to watch it. So shout out to Skylar. It sounds like he may not even be able to be stashed on the practice squad, like playing his way onto a roster somewhere. Because if the Dolphins are going to try to put him on the practice squad behind Bridgewater and Tua, he may well get snatched up by somebody else. So that's really, I think Skylar may well find himself on a roster by the time the season starts. So that would be great. Joe, appreciate another donation, Joe. I don't see a comment attached to that one, but very kind of you. Thank you for supporting the channel. Sincerely, I know that you are here pretty much show in, show out, and I appreciate it a ton. Thank you so much for your support. If you want to join the party here and hop in, once again, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something, and that is how you can do that. All right, so let me say this, the latest from Pac-12 country, because I have it on my outline as like a header, like latest from Pac-12 country. The latest from Pac-12 country is that apparently my peace offering went over well. And look, it was sincere. Okay, it was sincere. I am a bit weary of the bickering back and forth. I won't even call it really fighting. It's just kind of bickering, I think, between the Big 12 and Pac-12. And it feels like the dust has started to settle a little bit on that as we get closer to the season. Again, I think that will help. But John Wilner followed me on Twitter. I got a John Wilner follow on Twitter, so maybe that makes me a traitor to some of you, but I feel like we're cool. And I really like and respect Wilner the whole time. That doesn't mean there haven't been things that have rubbed me the wrong way in some of this, but I'm sure the same would be true on my end had he been following me the whole time. That's just kind of how it goes. But I really respect Wilner. I think he's a very good reporter. Obviously has been in the game for a long time. I don't think anybody can dispute his reporting chops by breaking the USC-UCLA story. He is the guy in the Pac-12. So now I got to follow, guys. I feel like I'm in a little bit with the Pac-12 crowd. But no, I have the latest from Wilner and Canzano and what they said in their mailbags over the weekend here. First, Oregon lost its president to Northwestern. And again, I think it bears repeating. Like that is something significant. This is a time where you need a lot of people pulling in the same direction. You need a lot of people involved in meetings at a high level happening very rapidly. There may be more time now than there was in the immediate panic stages of what happened when USC and UCLA left. These are still times where you do not want to be waiting around. And I guess Oregon theoretically has the ball in their court more than most do in a conference realignment world right now, because they're going to dictate really what happens with the Pac-12. Are they willing to sign anything? But I would think like you need a president to be on board with that. Like, does this and when Joe asked about the timeline earlier, honestly, this could be something that does delay the timeline and make it less likely that something happens before the end of the calendar year with the Pac-12. Because if Oregon, I would assume, is not going to put their name on anything without the approval of a new president. So, I mean, I guess Oregon State, I know, has had an interim president for a while. I was reading that earlier today, that they had a president get pushed out in 2021, and they've just been rolling with an interim since. So maybe Oregon could do that too, when there's an interim that would be comfortable enough saying, hey, we'll go ahead and give up whatever 4 or 5 years to the Pac-12 with this next grant of rights, whatever that's going to be. But I don't know. It certainly is not going to help expedite the process and the timeline with what's going on in the Pac-12 right now. The fact that they're going to have to replace a president here, and that can be a long process. I mean, I'm trying to remember the exact timeline. K-State just went through it not that long ago, within the last year, with the outgoing president, Richard Myers. I mean, it was months, and it takes a committee, and, it's an ordeal. Like, I would think this is a multiple-month ordeal for Oregon likely to find their next president. So it's going to push back the timeline for everybody. And then just for Oregon in general, you would prefer, I would think, to have somebody who has been there for a while that you know what they're thinking, kind of the way that they lean on things. You trust them, like you've had a chance to develop trust with everybody else. And just some symmetry. I think a level of symmetry at a school like that would be of the utmost importance right now. And then, like, I am not trying to speculate about anything morbid here, but I did see another thing that was asked about to Canzano this week was like, hey, Phil Knight, is not exactly getting younger. I want to say Phil Knight's in his 80s. I should look this up. Phil Knight age. 84. Yeah, 84 years old for Phil Knight. So Oregon fans were also like a little antsy, like, hey, what happens when Phil Knight goes? Like, what's going to happen? All the money, what's going to happen to Oregon? Will he be able to save the Pac-12 before he's done? A lot to think about there for Oregon in terms of the leadership and everything that's happening. So I wonder about how stable Oregon is feeling really here at the moment with that happening, and they're the belle of the ball in the Pac-12. They are the ones that are going to have to sign on something to really make it work if the Pac-12 is going to survive. So keep that in mind. Something certainly to keep in mind is what's happening right now at Oregon. Alpha Cat, thank you for the donation, Alpha Cat. Alpha Cat, if you're not going to wear, he says, if you're not going to wear purple, at least get an orange shirt with a cowboy on it. That T-shirt makes me think of that other orange school. Oh, well, this is actually red. So this is a Patrick Mahomes shirt. I might just have to stand here. There we go. Yeah, it's like the Grim Reaper Patrick Mahomes shirt. So rest assured, that is red. That is red, not orange. I am not wearing a burnt orange shirt, I can promise you. Some of that may be the lighting here, too. I don't have my light quite adjusted like I typically do. But I do appreciate the concern, because if I ever show up wearing a Texas shirt, I mean, you guys have my permission to totally rip me there. I wouldn't do that to you. But thank you for the donation and the support, Alpha Cat. Matt, thank you for the donation, Matt. I appreciate it. Matt says, can you tell me what could be some big statement games for the Big 12? Oh, boy. All right. Yeah, off the top of my head. Yeah, I mean, BYU, Notre Dame, obviously that could be. Cincinnati, Arkansas. I was talking to someone about Cincinnati, Arkansas this weekend. I mean, RJ Young is Fox Sports college football personality. I saw that he had Arkansas, like number 7 or 8. I mean, very high up there. I like Arkansas a lot. I love Sam Pittman and what he's doing. And I had forgotten about that game with Cincinnati and Arkansas. But that is one that, in that conversation, I was like, man, you talk about a game that could be a statement for, again, the new Big 12. Obviously, it would be the AAC technically this year. But a statement game early on to be like, look, Cincinnati ain't going anywhere. Like, Luke Fickell is not going anywhere, and Cincinnati is here to stay. It would be that kind of a game. I don't know if everybody is that high on Arkansas, and RJ Young is somebody who I respect him for this, is not at all afraid to shake it up with his top 25 rankings and kind of break free from the normal conventions that a lot of people abide by. It's really refreshing, honestly. But yeah, he has Arkansas very high up there. I think they are a really good team. So yes, that would be a huge one. That is definitely one that comes to mind. I'm going to look at Big 12 top non-conference football games 2022. I mean, look, you guys are going to hate this one, but one that could be a massive statement. If there's not a more massive statement than beating Alabama in college football, I don't know what there is. And speaking of that burnt orange T-shirt, hypothetically speaking, that one team in the Big 12 does play Alabama this year, and that is Texas. So I know that the question is really much more about new Big 12 as opposed to old Big 12, but that's a game that could do it. And here, I just pulled up a list on Yahoo of the best non-conference games of 2022, and the 4th one on the list is Cincinnati at Arkansas. So there is plenty of attention focused on that game. I mean, West Virginia Pitt. West Virginia is a team that I know I clashed with Mountaineer fans. I'm trying to remember how far back that was. Just bristling at thinking about them being like more than like an 8-4 team at best this year with JT Daniels. But hey, if West Virginia wants to prove everybody wrong, which most of what I've read and seen about West Virginia right now still has them in the lower half of the conference, I mean, going out and beating Pitt would be a nice way to make a statement. I don't think Pitt is going to be what they were last year, obviously. Not only did they lose Jordan Addison to USC, but they lost their quarterback, who was looking really good in preseason football yesterday, by the way. But still, it's going to be a nice statement game and a rivalry win for West Virginia. And West Virginia plays a fairly tricky non-conference schedule with Va Tech there, too. I think it would be very much behoove West Virginia to win that game. So, I mean, that's one that I would suggest. Does BYU really play Arkansas and Oregon? I do remember BYU having a very difficult schedule this year. Yeah. BYU's at Oregon on September 17th. How about that, man? I mean, honestly, that should be pretty much at the top of the list here. If we're talking about Big 12, Pac-12, and that's the feud of the summer, that's the feud that has everybody going this summer. BYU, Oregon should absolutely be on that list. And then BYU plays Arkansas on October 15th. So hell, can we just make it like the entire BYU schedule? Maybe that would be the way to go about it. BYU also has Notre Dame on October 8th. That would be an awesome one. They play Stanford. I mean, look, K-State was beating around Stanford last year. I'm not sure that that's really anything special these days, but you guys get the idea. I think those all would be fair games to pick from that come to mind. So appreciate the question. We got some football talk in, man. That was some actual football talk. I can definitely appreciate that right now. All right, let me go through some more of the mailbags here. And again, if you want to chip into the conversation, you can click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you donate. Get your question or comment for sure onto the chat and supersede everything else. Cut through the rest of the noise and support what I'm doing here on the channel. Also, please give the video a like. If you've hopped in here and you have not liked the video yet, I would much appreciate it. That is an easy way to support the channel as well that doesn't cost you anything. Okay, so a question here that came into John Wilner was, will the Big Ten give the remaining Pac-12 schools time to develop a plan forward, or will it disrupt the conference by using the new media deal to poach a school before the ink is dry? And Wilner, not surprisingly, says from here it appears the Pac-12 or the Big Ten is finished expanding for now. Pac-12 must decide in the next few months whether or not to sign a grant of rights agreement. In that regard, Oregon, Washington, and Stanford don't appear to have much choice. But I found this very interesting. He says none of them want to join the Big 12. They would only make the move if enough four corner schools depart that the conference dissolves. Okay, so he is still pitching. At least the thing that was significant to me there was that at least Wilner gave ink to a scenario where the four corner schools are convinced to join the Big 12, and then everybody else that's stuck in Big 10 limbo has to join the Big 12 because there's no other choice. And it felt like for a while, like that scenario really went away from everybody in Pac-12 country when this all got, and I think it was all based on reactions. And I've said this about how the Big 12, Pac-12 feud kind of developed. It's all a little bit fascinating to me, but I think it's all just about tone and how people reacted. For the Pac-12, initially, it was sheer panic, and you didn't know what was happening. So the Big 12 fans, sensing this, jump in hardcore on like, we're going to get the four corner schools and come in hot. And it's, what taking grenades, whatever it was that Kliavkov described it as. All that was coming from all corners of Big 12 country. We're going to go get these schools. We're going to pounce. And then because of that, the Pac-12 gets ultra defensive and fights back harder, saying there's no chance of that ever happening. There's no reality of this ever. And it turns into a match of like the way that people react gets everybody riled up and pulls everybody to extremes, which is, kind of society today, unfortunately, in America. And so everybody's on the extremes with this conversation when the reality is there probably is a scenario like that could still play out. It doesn't have to be just the Big Ten poaching the Pac-12 to still break them up. Now, is it extremely likely at this point? I don't think it's extremely likely, at least again, until we know what's going on with the Pac-12 TV deal. But Wilner at least gave some level of credence to like, hey, there is that as a possible scenario out there. So somewhat significant there, I would say, at least. Another question to Wilner. Now that it looks like the Pac-12 is going to survive, don't you think it makes sense for the conference to add 2 more members in the near future? Right now, I'd add San Diego State and go for Houston before they arrive in the Big 12 and get locked into an exit penalty. All right. Well, Wilner, again, you guys are going to like this. And this is why I keep stressing to you guys, like Wilner is a legitimate reporter. Wilner is legitimately analyzing the situation, I think, pretty fairly and gives credence to some of these scenarios that we believe here in Big 12 country are possible. Wilner says, first, I wouldn't assume the Pac-12 is going to survive. That's the most likely short-term outcome in our opinion, but it's not a lock. And Wilner says, we view survival as a 4.5-point favorite over extinction. That's anything but an overwhelming favorite. So there you have it. I mean, there is John Wilner in Pac-12 country still saying like, hey, 4.5-point favorite, that is far from impossible. It is definitely possible that in the short term, the Pac-12 would not survive. He says if the conference holds together, there's a reasonable chance it expands to 12 teams. Why? Because of inventory demands. As noted above, one of the Pac-12's chief selling points is the ability to provide inventory for late TV broadcast windows. So basically, they might expand just to be able to fill every single one of those windows possible for their next TV contract, to always have Pac-12 After Dark going. And he again reiterates, if expansion is the decision, San Diego State stands as the obvious call. But here is where the tease of the video comes in. He says Houston would be a first-rate addition depending on availability. We aren't privy to the documents signed by the university and whether it would be subject to the Big 12 exit fees. Houston, again, mentioned first, and not only by the mention, I say mentioned first, mentioned as the only Big 12 school and the first out of the Big 12 schools, not TCU, but Houston. And we go back to the Mac Engel reporting from last year at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He said it was TCU and Houston that got fairly close, or at least would have been at the top of the list for the Pac-12 there. Houston continues to come up there with the Pac-12. And I don't think Houston would leave because, once again, as I laid out earlier, like if most agree that the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are on pretty equal terms when it comes to what their financial value is going to be in the next TV contract, you're already signed up for this league. I'm saying this without knowing the specifics of the contract and what Houston would have to pay or what they wouldn't pay. Either way, it would be a headache to get out of the Big 12 to then go to the Pac-12. And then you are not only, basically even money jumping out to a new league, having to go through that headache, but then you're entering into kind of a purgatory, which is what it feels like the Pac-12 would be in for a little while, just waiting for the inevitable jump of their best brands to go to the Big Ten, and then the conference will implode, and then Houston would be out there looking for a home again. That just feels like way too much for anybody to reasonably want to go through. If you're the Pac-12, though, I understand why it gets brought up, and I would say, like, shoot your shot. Shoot your shot would be the idea there, and it's not like you're calling a Big Ten or an SEC school, right? It's not like that stupid blog out there that was, hey, I've been hearing the Big 12 is going to call Minnesota. Like that might take the cake for the dumbest realignment rumor / story that we've seen this go around. It's not that, right? Calling a Big 12 school, there would at least be some level of possibility there. Like I could even go like Wilner style and say, I think it would be much more than a 4.5 point favorite, but it would not be totally impossible, I suppose, in that scenario for Houston to say yes. But I think it would be highly, highly unlikely. But it does seem like, based on these guys who are as connected as anybody, because Canzano was asked a question about it as well, and he floated Houston. And he floated like 5 Mountain West schools with San Diego State at the top of the list, and then said, oh, by the way, I would probably call Houston too, just to see what happened. So Houston is the one school. If the Pac-12 are going to go after somebody from the Big 12, it definitely seems like it would be Houston. They want into Texas. That much seems very clear by what we heard about Houston and TCU last year. And Houston seems to be the pick over TCU based on what we're hearing out of Pac-12 country right now. All right, bunch of donations coming in. Bunch of donations. I imagine people have a lot of thoughts on that. Elvin, what's up, Elvin? Thank you for the donation. Thank you for the support, my friend. Says, with the money the Big Ten is going to make, do you think the SEC demands ESPN to match it? Okay, with the money the Big Ten is going to make, do you think the SEC demands ESPN to match it, or does ESPN use that money on the ACC, Big 12, and Pac-10? If I'm Sankey, I'm demanding more money. Interesting. I mean, I'd have to think about all the dynamics there. I'd probably need an attorney to uncover some of that because, I think they're basically just locked into this contract, and I don't know what the move is there, going into court, fighting a battle, trying to get out of a contract, and then shopping it out to everybody else. I'm just not sure that they have many options as far as that goes, unless, again, they were to expand. Like maybe the move there is to then say, well, we'll blow up the ACC, figure out the grant of rights thing later, and then we can renegotiate a deal when we have Miami and Florida State and Clemson coming into the league. I would think that would be the only actual recourse that they would have in that sort of scenario. Just off the top of my head, again, I am far from any kind of attorney or anybody, but I don't know that they really have that sort of option. And I get it. The Big Ten number is going to be astronomical. It's going to be crazy. It does look like they're going to be the financial leader here, but I don't think it's a significant enough form of money that it would be worth whatever that headache would be that you would have to go through. You do have leverage if you're the SEC because of who you are, but there's only a certain amount of it. You can't make every single thing happen that you want to necessarily. Juan, I appreciate Juan jumping right in with the Houston talk. My guy Juan says Houston is not going to the Pac-12 or ACC, period. Go Cougs. Well, we appreciate that here, Juan. Definitely looking forward to Houston being in the conference, and glad to hear that you're not interested in any of these Pac-12 wandering eyes, okay? Because do not need that to happen right here and right now. Juan, your Houston representative here on the channel says not happening. Our web, I think, sums this up fairly well. Our web says Wilner is a pro with a Pac-12 tilt, and yes, that is perfectly said. a pro with a Pac-12 tilt because that's where he's reporting from. That's what he knows. That's what he's been immersed in for so long. He says Canzano is a fanboy. I think I would lean towards saying that with the caveat that I understand how somebody would look at me and say the exact same thing. A Big 12 fanboy, and that's what you're going to get sometimes, though I try to be very fair. I can understand me saying that and being like, oh, I totally agree with that. Someone could come back and be like, dude, you're the exact same thing. In a moment of self-awareness, I would understand somebody coming back and saying that too. And then our web says Stewie, as in Stuart Mandel, is a hack getting owned regularly by Sam Bradshaw. Well, Sam Bradshaw, man, I respect the hell out of that guy. One, I mean, Mandel clearly does. He is aware of him and has referenced his work a couple of times. I will throw this shout out to Sam Bradshaw as well. In the interview that you're going to hear /see over the next 2 days in 2 parts with Bob Thompson, the former head of Fox Sports, he is aware of Sam Bradshaw's work and mentioned that he had read Sam Bradshaw's work. So there you go. Sam's in-depth TV numbers are getting to the desk of the former head of Fox Sports in addition to Stuart Mandel. And man, Bradshaw does not let him off the hook, man. He goes after him on Twitter, just debating, not really going after him like, hey, you suck, but just like legitimate debating and continuing to push and question. And I appreciate that, man. That's how you fight for this conference. Sam Bradshaw is definitely doing a lot of that. So everybody should be very thankful of his work and highly suggest that you go read it. Sikkim365, find Sam Bradshaw on Twitter. Easy way to get started there. Boom to the Sooner. Boom to the Sooner. Welcome into the chat. Boom to the Sooner says, would Utah want to be back in the same conference with their old Mountain West buddies, TCU and BYU? Well, Utah seems to think that they should be in probably like the AFC West. I think that's where Utah fancies itself right now. That's what I've gathered from Utah fans throughout conference realignment. They feel like they should be sending that vaunted defense up against Patrick Mahomes and company. That's where Utah thinks that they belong, not the Big 12. They're thinking AFC West. I guess maybe NFC West. You know, that might be like an easier place to start. It's a winnable division. The NFC West, we'll say, for Utah. In all seriousness, I'm sure there would be some appeal there, but Utah has a very, very big ego right now. They think that they are better and above the Big 12, better than and above the Big 12, and belong in like Big 10 SEC conversations right now. So I think there's probably some element of the fan base that would enjoy some of that. I mean, I'm sure it would be great for them to have the Holy War be a conference game, but I mean, they are already playing the game anyway, right? So I don't know. You'd have to take that up with Utah fans, but most of what I've seen is a lot of inflated ego. I don't even know if like arrogance is totally the right word. I guess it basically is arrogance, but it's just an ego of where their football program is actually at on the field right now and not realizing a lack of self-awareness in the difference between brand and what your team is actually on the field right now. I think that's the real cognitive dissonance going on with Utah fans. James says, as a Houston alum and fan, I will be red-faced angry if Houston goes to the Pac-12. It's a stupid move and would burn bridges. Pretty succinctly put there, James. First of all, thank you for the donation and thank you for being here tonight on the chat. That would be my take on it and my view on it as well. You put it in a much more succinct manner than I did, which is like, yeah, you'd be burning bridges, you'd be causing yourself headaches, and you'd be leaving for, I mean, I guess at very best, a lateral situation. But again, with the stability, I would say not a lateral situation there. And you'd be going to a conference with fan bases that don't care as much. And I think that is one of the things that has really struck me about the new schools since it's been announced that they're coming here. The camaraderie with everybody, the fact that these are schools with fan bases that really do care a lot. And I think the new schools have really appreciated that and finding that in the Big 12, a place that really genuinely cares a lot about football and has a passion for it that is just lacking there in the Pac-12. So you'd definitely be missing out on that if you went to the Pac. So look, James and Juan are on board with Houston sticking around, all right? So I feel pretty good about this. Thank you, James. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for the donation. Let me see. Boy, Google just tried to close out of my entire window there. That could have been bad. Michael says, even if it's even dollars, they'd be traveling too far. Yeah, also another part of it, they would be traveling. You are correct about that. That is more travel. That's an increased costs. So that might offset some of the money even if there were, let's say in a hypothetical situation, there were slightly more money in the Pac-12, you would have more travel costs. So another very good point there. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jamie, for the donation. I don't see a question or comment. Oh, there it is, Jamie. Jamie says, if Oregon and Washington go to the Big Ten, how many schools do you think the Big 12 would take at most? So you got the four, right? The four corner schools, obviously. And then beyond that, if Oregon and Washington are gone, if it's only those two and like Stanford doesn't make the cut, I suppose I'd put Stanford and possibly Cal on the table. That's a hard one to see because of the attitude there of Stanford and Cal and those places not wanting to be in the Big 12. But I mean, I would say in your question, I think in the spirit of your question, how many schools would the Big 12 take at most? I think at most it would be like everybody else minus Washington State and Oregon State as at least a possibility. Because at that point, if the Pac-12 is blowing up, then it might just, I mean, then we're turning into like everybody just needs a lifeboat and the Big 12 could start just branding itself as like the best of the rest, like the conference with everybody else. Because at that point, maybe the SEC says, all right, to hell with the ACC grant of rights. We're going to go pluck those schools. And then the Big 12 just scoops up like everybody that's left. So I think that's at least a somewhat plausible scenario. So I would just say like everybody else left in the Pac-12 at that point could be on the table minus Oregon State and Washington State, because I think everybody understands and would agree there that that's when you're going to become dilutive, not additive at all with the conference. And they're too far behind everybody else in terms of brand and what they actually are in the field, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be my answer, which I guess means 6. That would be 6, right? There's 10 now. They lose Oregon and Washington. They would not be taking Washington State, Oregon State. I think 6 is the answer there. But appreciate the donation. Appreciate the support, Jamie. Thank you for being here tonight. Michael says, boom to the Sooner. Utah is too good for that. Another more succinctly put answer than what I gave to the question there. Utah thinks that they are too good for the Big 12. They would probably at some stage, what the stages of denial or whatever, you'd probably get to a point where you'd be like, okay, you know what? At least we're in this conference where we get to play our old rivals, TCU and BYU, and have that whole thing going on. But I think it would take some time for them to get there to truly appreciate it. Matthew, thank you for the donation, Matthew. Matthew says, Wilner is out of touch. Anyone from Texas knows Houston doesn't mean you're capturing that market like TCU and Dallas. Houstonians think about the Astros and Texans. Texas Tech would be a far better ad. Yeah, we're kind of back to the conversations. This takes me back to convos that we were having like a year ago at this time. I remember Texas Tech early out of the gates. There was a lot of speculation about that. Like Texas Tech, much bigger university, obviously, than TCU. Huge alumni presence in DFW. And there was a lot of chatter about that. Like if you go get Texas Tech, you would have more of a presence in DFW than you would if you got TCU. It seemed like there was some talk about Houston, but honestly, last year until the Mac Engel piece, I didn't feel like there was as much of that as there was TCU and Texas Tech there for a minute. I get the argument. I definitely do get the argument. TCU being around the Big 12, going there, I mean, it's frankly a pretty underwhelming football environment. Now, their football team has not been underwhelming at all. Obviously, that's been a really salty team under Gary Patterson, and I'm talking about the time I was covering the league, which goes back to 2011. There were some awesome teams there, and TCU recruits talent, and it helps being in DFW big time to recruit talent and a high ceiling, a program that won 11 games multiple times under Gary Patterson in the Big 12 era. So I get it, but when you go to the stadium, it's fairly small. It's never very full, and it just doesn't give you that same kind of presence that a school like Texas Tech would. So I think that's a very complicated discussion. The only thing I would say is some pushback to that, Matthew, is just simply that what we've seen over and over from reporting in Pac-12 country and reporting in Big 12 country. Again, I understand you would say, hey, maybe Mac Engel is biased being in Dallas-Fort Worth. But everything we've seen has always been about Houston and maybe to a lesser extent TCU. There's been more conversation about that. There was even for a minute there that, now this is where I would classify more as like a Twitter rumor, but Twitter rumors about like TCU being at least on a list for the Big Ten, pretty like further down than the top 5 or 6, but on a list for the Big Ten because they wanted to get into Dallas. So it just seems like the thought is from the industry that Houston and or TCU would give you a better presence in the market in the state of Texas than what Texas Tech would. I'm not saying that's necessarily correct. I'm just saying most of what we have seen would indicate that that is how the industry feels, which is ultimately what would matter here. But appreciate the donation, appreciate the support, and look, I'm not trying to mess with Texas Tech. Texas Tech fans. Once again, let me reiterate: I'm just telling you what the other reporters have said. That is not me. I want no piece of the Cactus Mafia. I want no piece of the Cactus Mafia. You guys are good with me. Somebody told me on Twitter the other day that I must have been like a misplaced Texas Tech fan at birth. I'm literally wearing a shirt with your boy Patrick Mahomes on it right now. I want no piece of Tech Twitter Mafia coming after me. All right. I love the gambling gauchos. I'm just telling you what has been reported by others. Okay. So love you guys. Love you guys. Robbie, thank you for the donation, Robbie, and also for being a moderator here, keeping things under control. Robbie says you should do a 3-mod pod with the mask and try to get him to do videos again. Always love them, man. Speaking of West Virginia, I think his most memorable was definitely the West Virginia one in 2012. Just go Google K-State mask West Virginia. I think that would probably get it done. That was a time, man. I remember going to that game. Basically, long story short, Reader's Digest version here. Random K-State fan. He wore this goofy mask and made these like trash talk videos in maybe only 2012. Did it start in 2011? 2011, 2012. And K-State had 2 great seasons where they won double-digit games each of those years. And the one that really picked up some steam was West Virginia. And there were all these angry West Virginia fans. And I'm getting ready to go cover that game in 2012. It was my first trip to Morgantown. I was going to have to be on the sideline filming. And I knew it, like I'm going to be on the K-State sideline, not really like I'm wearing K-State gear, but I'm going to be on the sideline. That I don't know, it just felt like things were going to be really tense, and I was a little nervous about that. Like, how are West Virginia fans going to react to all this? Am I going to have to duck from bottles or anything from the crowd? And nothing of the sort happened. Probably in part because K-State just absolutely rolled that game. Sorry, West Virginia fans, but that was a bad one for Gino and company. Never forget him slapping the tarp on the sideline. But yeah. K-State mask. That is a name I haven't heard in a while. I have no idea what happened to that guy. No idea. But thank you for the donation, Robbie. I appreciate it. What did I miss here from Matthew? I saw something from Matthew. Matthew says, Matthew, thank you for the donation. Matthew says, not that we at Texas Tech are interested in the Pac-12. Yes, fair enough. I know that, Matthew. I know you guys are Big 12 solid right here. And I don't blame you, by the way, for like a year ago. It seemed like there was a faction that very much fancied the Pac-12 a year ago. I don't blame you at all for that. It was every man for himself at that point in time. So no hard feelings there at all. Things changed quite a bit in a year. Elvin, thank you for another donation. Elvin, much appreciate that, my friend. Elvin says, what do you think CBS was thinking when they lost the SEC because they didn't want to pay over the $50 million the last contract, but had to give the Big Ten $300 million when they will get the second best game? That'd be interesting. So the idea here, like, hey, did CBS mess up by not overpaying for the SEC and instead now having to come back and overpay for the Big Ten? That's an interesting question. That's a very interesting thought. I don't know. Honestly, like I guess I would have to see. This is where I feel like and I try and be honest with you guys, I'm out over my skis a little bit here. In terms of like for sure how they would feel. I can understand how that would make some sense. And the thing I feel like it sucks to kind of lose the SEC on CBS. It'll be weird watching the Big Ten there. As a neutral college football fan, I would rather watch an SEC game than I would a Big Ten game. I say neutral like I don't have a stake in either conference. I'd rather watch an SEC football game. Either way, the price was getting crazy, and like the cost of doing business with one of those conferences was going to be pretty insane based on the way the market is going right now. So yeah, it is interesting how all that worked out. I mean, will ESPN regret in a few years not, I guess in their eyes, overpaying for the Big Ten package that they were bidding on? I think that will be a really fascinating thing to look back on here 5, 10, et cetera, years from now when we get to that point. Our web says, why Houston won't go to the Pac-12? Southwest Conference rivals just means more. Hey, Southwest Conference football, it just means more, baby. I saw a tweet. Maybe I can pull that back up because I feel like I did retweet it. There was a tweet about Southwest Conference football, and there's 1 week this year in the football season where it's like here we go. September 24th, Arkansas against Texas A&M, TCU at SMU, Rice at Houston, Texas at Texas Tech. How about that for a lineup? Southwest Conference football, baby. It does just mean more, in the words of our web. Thank you, sir. I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. If I have to, I may have to sprint into the other room and get my laptop charger. My laptop is dying faster than I thought it would. I just turned the brightness way down on my screen. Okay, so if I'm squinting, bear with me. And if I have to sprint and go get my charger, bear with me on that as well. But I'm going to try and make it through the last 15 minutes or so here on the chat without having to do that. Fred, thank you for the donation. Fred says, this whole realignment is driving me nuts. What do you think about Colorado going to the Big 12? I would love it. I would welcome it. I very much miss Colorado in the Big 12, mainly the trips to Boulder, the beautiful scenery that's there, like that setting with the stadium, and just the old connection and rivalry that I had there as a K-State fan growing up watching Colorado in the Big 12. It seemed like there was at least some level of interest there at first. Like Colorado maybe entertained the idea, not quite as much as Arizona, but probably second in line of those four corner schools. And but I think it'll take a big group if they're going to come. I think it'll take a big group to get them to come along for the ride. So that's basically where I'm at. I think on Colorado right now, I have not heard much on the Colorado front in quite a while. So it's been mainly like Arizona making the noise and then Utah on the other end making the noise in the Pac-12 with some Arizona State, seeming like Arizona State is not real keen on jumping to the Big 12 either. But yeah, I would very much welcome it. I think most in the Big 12 would. That would be a fun thing that could come back around in the realignment world, I think, for the Big 12. So Juan, jumping back in. I appreciate it, Juan. Thank you for another donation. Juan says, FYI, John, Texas Tech is one of many fan bases that try to claim the Houston Metro, which includes Texas, Texas A&M, LSU, Arkansas, Oklahoma, etc. It never ends. They hate Houston because it's actually in the H and good at football. Hey, there we go. We got some smack talk coming from Juan. Again, Texas Tech fans, Cactus Mafia, not me. It's Juan. But I can understand his frustration there about Houston because, yeah, like Texas A&M, I mean, that's all Texas A&M would be the one that would just really annoy the you-know-what out of me, Juan, because I hear A&M trying to claim that a lot. When I talk to people I was talking to someone recently about the state of Texas and how it goes, and they were like, man, Texas A&M tries to claim Houston for sure. LSU obviously has recruited Houston a lot. Arkansas, especially the better they get. We mentioned Sam Pittman and what Arkansas is doing now. Like the better and better that they get, they're going to create more and more into that conversation. So I get it. And that is the potential. The reason why all those places try and claim it, one, is obvious. There's so much talent there. And everybody wants to be the school in Houston because you'll be getting some really, really good football players if you do. So I understand why you would be extremely frustrated with that. And because you're getting teams from multiple leagues here. And that's what Houston has to try to capitalize on here. You are literally there. You have the advantage of being absolutely, literally right there. Now you have the juice of being in a Power 5, at least for now, conference, maybe a Power 3 second tier, however you want to label it, conference. Now you got to use that juice. So Texas Tech fans, that's one, man. You guys go after it. That will not be me. I'll let you guys duke that one out. But I appreciate the donation and the thought there, Juan. Okay, I'm getting nervous about this. This is going to be the dumbest thing I've ever done in a chat. Let me go walk to the other room and grab my laptop charger. Please bear with me. I have a lot of donations still to get through here, and I don't want to mess you guys up. So in doing that, I'm going to go grab my laptop charger. Give me a second. Somebody's going to have to entertain the chat. Somebody's going to have to entertain the chat. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. I swear I'm back. It didn't take very long. There we go. Nothing dying. Nobody losing out on their donation in question. I can turn the brightness back up so I can read, and the numbers actually went up. We have more people in the chat since I sprinted away to get my laptop charger there. I guess I should do that more often. Our web R Webb, how about the mask before number one KSU goes to Waco? Thank you, R Webb, for reminding me about 2012. K-State could have taken on a pretty mediocre Notre Dame team in the national championship that year. Very appropriate into the story. K-State, the worst program in college football history when Bill Snyder takes over, beats arguably the best in college football history, Notre Dame, most storied for a national championship, but instead Lake Seastrunk had to run for like 1,000 yards in one game and beat K-State in Waco. Thank you for that memory, R Webb. Much appreciated. Nick, thank you for the donation. Nick says, I was in Manhattan 2 weeks ago. Great place. My dad and I will be there for the Oklahoma State game and are looking forward to it. Do you think the Big 12 adds Pac-12 schools? Does it happen this fall or next summer? Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words about Manhattan. Nick, I do think it's a great place. I assume that you're an Oklahoma State fan, especially because, and let me shout out Nick for this. You guys can see it. Look at the way that he spells OSU in the chat. It's the lowercase O, the capital S, and a lowercase u. I love that. I love the way like Oklahoma State branded themselves with that for a while. And I love typing it out like that. I try to do it whenever I can. So shout out to you for that. Do you think the Big 12 adds Pac-12 schools? Does it happen this fall or next summer? Feels to me less and less likely by the day that it's going to happen this fall. Again, I mentioned earlier today, Oregon's going to have to replace their president. They need to find out what's going on with their TV deals. I think that would slow it down. It just seems like there are a lot of hurdles to clear before that happens. And I don't think anything is happening right now with the Big Ten. I don't think anything's happening right now with Notre Dame. So I still think it's possible eventually. But yeah, I think it would be closer toward like the next summer timeline than it would be this fall. Again, with the caveat that I give every single time, that could change very quickly. It could change based on the Pac-12 getting bad news about a TV deal, et cetera, et cetera. But that's kind of where I'm feeling right now with that, Nick. But thank you for being here. Thank you for the donation. And I hope you guys enjoyed Manhattan. Really do. If anybody ever goes to Manhattan, you want some tips, hit me up on Twitter at JL Kurtz. Tell you all the best spots. Vanity Rose, thank you for the donation. Vanity Rose says Washington State has more wins and a higher viewership than Arizona. They even have one 10-win season since 1999. Even Boise is better than Arizona. You know what? It's a fair point, and I'm glad that you made it on behalf of Washington State because I do feel bad. They get included in that group with Oregon State where everybody's like, hey, nothing is going on here. These two schools are going to get left out, left high and dry. Now, the thing that is peculiar to me is those TV ratings. All the stories with the basic out of context numbers have Washington State very high. My guess on that, and I have not done any of this research, my guess would be that they were playing on Pac-12 After Dark more often than others. And I think Mike Leach also probably helped that from kind of you wanted to watch him, you wanted to watch them. It was the perfect pairing for Pac-12 After Dark, like head coach and the brand of what that was. I would imagine that had a lot to do with it and that can really, really fade pretty quickly. But it is fair. It's true. Those numbers are much higher, and Arizona has been a very bad football program and has not achieved the heights that Washington State has. So I really can't argue too much with that. I think Arizona still, as a general brand, has more value. But that is not really. I get how you would be frustrated as a Wazoo fan and arguing that. I really do. Or maybe you're even not a Wazoo fan, but somebody arguing that. I get why you would push back on that. Arizona's basketball program obviously really helps it, but I've said this before. I mean, it's the Pac-12's version of Kansas. So how do you view Kansas in the Big 12? It would be similarly for Arizona out there in the Pac-12 with not quite as good as a basketball program as Kansas. So fair points. I still think long-term you'd rather have Arizona, but Washington State has an argument based on hey, look at what we've actually done on the field here in contemporary times. So I get it. I do get it. Oliver, thank you for the donation, Oliver. Oliver says, Texas Tech fans, you just don't get it. Houston has a bigger market than Lubbock. This is why the Pac-12 would want Houston. Go Cougs, born and raised in Houston. Man, Oliver, we got Oliver and Juan going at the Tech fans. Again, Cactus Mafia, not coming for me. But this is kind of entertaining to see the back and forth here between schools in Texas. And remember what I tell you guys all the time. Everybody asks, new Big 12, what are you looking forward to? What rivalries are going to be awesome? And I always say, I'm just looking forward to, what rivalries naturally develop. This seems like there's some fun tension here between Texas Tech and Houston. And, look, I realized the game was played last year. You actually did get a game to go play out there on the field. And it's interesting the way the season played out. Tech wins the game. Houston winds up with a great season after that. And now everybody's left here to talk a little smack in the offseason. So I love it. That's what college football is about, baby. Boom to the Sooner. Thank you for the donation. Boom to the Sooner. Boom to the Sooner says, if the Pac-12 dissolved and Utah wound up back in the Mountain West, would the Utah athletic director keep his job? And would you laugh at Utah on this very channel if it happened? Hell yes, I would laugh at Utah on this very channel if it happened. I can guarantee you that, Boom to the Sooner. And that is maybe not fair because I'm sure the vocal, probably minority of Utah fans are, in fact, that a minority. But, they've been pretty vocal. And so that would be a classic example of getting some egg in your face. And I do think that scenario is possible. Like Utah fans be like, hey, we've got some people putting us in the preseason top 10. I've even seen as high as like number 4 from some folks this year. And they equate that to like, hey, we should be in the Big 10 or we should be in the SEC. Well, if there's a scenario where they wouldn't even, Pac-12 blows up, they wouldn't even get into the Big 12, I think more than likely they would. But there's a scenario where they couldn't because of the presence of BYU already in the league. And like, hey, additive or dilutive, you've already got a big chunk of the state of Utah with BYU. Could be their own rival that does them in as far as that goes. So would the Utah AD keep his job? I mean, that's a great question. That would be a pretty bad offense to have happen if you really do get left totally high and dry and all of that. But there would be some laughing. Yes, I can assure you of that. I think there would be some laughing, not just from me, but from others on this channel who have followed this whole saga. Hooterville Homestead says, John, thank you for the donation, by the way. Says, John, don't be surprised if the Big 12 gets San Diego State. If they offer $1.2 million on their end, then double that with the Big 12 team they are playing. Okay, so you're saying 1.2 million kind of viewership number there with San Diego State. Well, I've said it before, and we'll say it again. Like, I think San Diego State is in play for both leagues here. If the scenario that would still seem the most likely to me for San Diego State coming to the Big 12 would be with Arizona. You can only wiggle Arizona loose from the Pac-12 and you want to partner with them. You want somebody else. And I think the main advantage that San Diego State would have to sell there is we keep hearing over and over again about Pac-12 After Dark and how much of a selling point that is for TV. If that's the case, you want more windows available to be able to offer if you're the Big 12 there. San Diego State is another team along with Arizona and then along with BYU that would afford you that opportunity. So you're just giving yourself more late windows there to sell the TV. I think that would be the biggest asset. I mean, obviously being in SoCal doesn't hurt at all. And I will tell you this, Hooterville Homestead, if you are a San Diego State fan, you're definitely going to want to tune into, I forget if it's the video that's coming out tomorrow or Tuesday, but I asked Bob Thompson, the former head of Fox Sports, about the value of San Diego State and what it would provide and if it would be additive or dilutive for the Big 12 or Pac-12. And he gave a pretty in-depth answer on San Diego State. So there's a tease for you. Make sure and check out those videos coming up this week because you'll get some insight there from a guy who's been in these rooms, used to be the head of all of Fox Sports there on the value that San Diego State has. Brett, and by the way, again, for the record, like I would really enjoy San Diego State coming into the conference. Obviously, a part of that is I would want them to be additive. I would want it to all work out positively for the conference in terms of what they bring. But I think on the surface, like I would love the trips to San Diego. I love the potential that's there. They're kicking what on the field right now. So I think there would be a lot of positives to it happening. I think I'm getting to the part in the chat now where I actually left to go get the charger. I'm laughing at some of these. Thank you, Brett, for the donation. Brett, I do not see a question or comment attached, but thank you for the support and the donation, Brett. Much appreciate that. Joe, thank you for the donation. Joe says, Texas A&M ran away to the SEC because they were getting spanked in the Big 12. Well, I mean, the reality for Texas A&M is that they've been kind of the same sort of program in the SEC. Now, again, they're making a lot more money. They're certainly louder. They're amplifying their accomplishments more, fake as they may be on walls on their stadium. They're recruiting really well. I mean, I can't take anything away from their recruiting. They certainly act the part of a big-time program right now. But I saw Twitter noise the other day, like someone crying about, like, oh, everybody said it was a message board genius post. That's what it was. So it was a Texags post, which Texags can be a wild place. But, someone saying, hey, so-and-so acts like we're just an 8-4 team that bought everything. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you quite literally are like an 8-4 team that has thrown around a lot of money. That's what A&M is. And they have not crossed that threshold of being more than that as of right now. Win against Bama was great last year, but they have not totally crossed that threshold yet. So Anyway, there's a little Texas A&M smack talk for you. Matt, thank you for the donation, Matt. Matt says Texas Tech 4-game win streak against Houston. Tech won 9 of the last 10. Complete domination by Tech. Scoreboard. All right, there's the smack talk coming back at the Houston folks from the Texas Tech side. That's pretty good. I'm enjoying both sides of this debate. I'll just be the moderator here between Texas Tech and Houston fans tonight in the chat. You guys are making this fun. I appreciate that. Matt says scoreboard because Tech has won 9 of the last 10 in a 4-game win streak right now against Houston. Get this game in the Big 12, baby. Like, let's start watching this as a conference game. I'm here for it, man. Don, thank you so much. Incredibly generous donation. Far too kind. Thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting and dropping that here in the channel tonight. Don asks, if the new Pac-12 is behind the new Big 12 in media dollars, which conference is really stronger? If you consider Washington and Oregon, don't put the Pac-12 over the Big 12. Are the Washington and Oregon brands really better than the top brands of the Big 12? Go Cats, keep up the good work. Thank you, Don. Thank you for the question. Again, incredibly thankful for your donation and your support. I do think that Washington and Oregon are better brands than anything in the Big 12. I think that's a hard one to deny. Oregon is going on, a decade and a half, 2 decades of being in the conversation for like coolest brand in college football. And that's probably faded the last few years as the Pac-12 has become worse. But, if we say it peaked like around 2014, that was the Mariota year, right in the playoff, the first playoff, the Jameis Winston game with like the backwards fumble or whatever. If Oregon peaked right around there, I mean, they still have a lot of brand value, like residual brand value from that, even if it's eroded a little bit. And Washington, it's more old school. I mean, you're talking like more old money with Washington there with their brand value. Being in Seattle certainly helps. I think they are better brands, but the piece there and you may be getting at this a little bit, the piece there that is tricky is, again, they're not really, they're kind of like halfway committed, I mean, they're sort of like you have half the value of them. You can utilize partial value there of those brands, but you don't fully have them because they're not going to fully commit themselves to you. I mean, it feels like the Washington-Oregon situation with the Pac-12 is more like a friends with benefits kind of thing instead of an actual long-term relationship. Like Oregon and Washington are going to use the Pac-12 over the next couple of years for what it is that they really need, and then they're going to get out. And when that stops fulfilling them, when someone better comes along that has what they really need and want, value in a long-term partner, they're going to be gone. So there's a little analogy for you on what I feel like is going on with Washington and Oregon. So that's the problem. Yes, they are better brands, but how long do you really have them? And what is the real value there if they're not committed to you long-term? So yes, that's the argument, Don, we've been trying to make here on this channel for a long time. I think you're pretty much in lockstep there. And basically, I would just frame it like, if you do not have a full commitment from them, and there are going to be problems with trying to discuss unequal revenue sharing, which, by the way, Canzano, I dropped this earlier, I teased it, but Canzano had said if the Pac-12 does unequal revenue sharing, it would be basically merit-based. Like whoever makes the college football playoff or the NCAA tournament, like you would get a higher share if you do, which I thought was very funny because it's like, look, Texas has wanted to just coast on brand value and say, hey, we subsidize the conference because of our brand value. How would that go over? You told Texas, like, hey, guys, you got to actually earn it. Well, then over the last 13 years, they'd be slumming it with the rest of us near the bottom of the league, the middle to bottom of the league, while everybody else scoops it up by actually accomplishing things. It's putting Oregon in that position. So my question would be, is that enough to get Oregon to sign? And again, back to that ultimate question, Don, how much value is there in Oregon and Washington's brands if you're not able to fully utilize them? So thank you once again, Don. I appreciate that a lot. And good question, good insight there. Matthew says, food for thought. UCF and Houston joining the Big 12 drains players from those states that would otherwise go to the SEC schools due to regionality. Maybe more of the players will be attracted to the Power 5 title. I think you're right, Matthew. I think the problem is that you're not going to be taking away schools from the top tier of the SEC. They're going to continue to get whoever they want. I mean, hell, the frustrating thing for me is somebody, a K-State fan, obviously that follows K-State very closely. I mean, big name schools, the SEC's coming in and plucking kids out of Kansas, because recruiting has changed so much now. You can get video of guys everywhere. It's easier to recruit nationally for a lot of these schools. They can drop in and get whoever really they want. Now, if you want to say the second tier SEC schools, Arkansas, South Carolina, like those schools of the world might have a tougher time. Now we're having a conversation. I think that's where it becomes more of a conversation. You can keep some more of those kids home as opposed to going to those types of schools, and that can definitely be an advantage. But yeah, I think if the general statement is like over time that will like legitimately erode the SEC, I don't think that would happen because the top programs in the SEC are going to be able to continue to pull basically whoever they want, and the money is going to continue to be there. We're talking about like we're talking about revenue sharing now, revenue sharing with the players. The Big Ten had discussed that. There's going to be more money available to do that in the Big Ten and the SEC, like a whole host of reasons that they'll continue to up their advantage. Juan, Juan chiming back in on the Texas Tech Houston back and forth. Juan says, all this yapping from Texas Tech fans. Texas Tech has almost 30 years of Power 5 money and still have a losing record against Houston. I wouldn't be talking trash. Woo! Boy, okay. Again, Cactus Mafia, your move. That's not me. Not me just reading what Juan said. Juan paid to donate, so I got to read it. And this has been incredibly entertaining. Incredibly entertaining back and forth tonight. Our web says Baylor, TCU, Tech, and Houston were all in the Southwest Conference rivals. I'm here for some Southwest Conference rivalries, man. I am very much here for it. I didn't really get to experience much of that. Like by the time I was born in '89, so by the time I really like came of age to be able to like realize what was happening in college football, it was about the time the Big 12 started, like 96, 97, 98. That was when I really got into it, was super into K-State football in the Big 12 and actually have some memories. But before that, when it was the actual Southwest Conference, I was too young. So I need a little dose of it. Jamie, thank you for the donation, Jamie. Jamie says, hope to see a Big 12 SEC challenge. Great work, Woo Pig Suey. I think I caught earlier, Jamie, that you are an Arkansas fan. Thank you for being here, Arkansas fan, hanging out in the Big 12 chat. Much appreciate that, Jamie, and I've seen quite a bit of you lately. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the donation. I would love to see some sort of scheduling arrangement with the SEC. I think that would be amazing. Obviously great for the Big 12. It's been discussed here before, and my question was always like, hey, would the SEC think that it's worth it? But we may get to a point where something like that could happen. I would very much love to see that. Vanity Rose says, so having both Arizona and Arizona State is good, but BYU and Utah would be bad. Isn't the idea to have as many teams as possible that can get to the playoffs? Fair point. I think in bringing that up again, Arizona and Arizona State, I'm not, honestly, I don't really have a very strong opinion there on like which I'd rather have. I think the piece about pulling Arizona and Arizona State both in is you want to kill the Pac-12. It's eat or be eaten, kill off the league. So you want to pull in both of those schools. And that's why I would lean toward, and what I was kind of saying earlier, like I would, in the scenario that was being played out there about Utah, I don't think they would get left out of the Big 12. I think they would probably still get to come. And especially if it's before, a lot of this four corner talk is like before the Pac-12 has been pulled apart, you would be doing the pulling apart. And that's why you would go for all. I think all would make the cut from a Big 12 standpoint if it really truly came down to it, to just torpedo that conference. But yeah, I mean, look, BYU and Utah, if you're talking about football value, I mean, it's not even close. Like BYU and Utah well eclipse what Arizona and Arizona State are doing on the field. But I would say the part I would disagree with, it is not entirely about as many teams as you can that can go to the playoff, because brand matters more. I mean, is the SEC really getting a playoff contender in Texas? They're not. But they're getting a huge brand, and they're getting a team that people care about. And so there are things in realignment that matter more than just simply what it is that you do on the field. But you made some good points there, Vanity Rose, tonight. You got me a little bit there. All right, let me get to the last couple of donations here. Man, we're at an hour, 8 minutes. This has flown by tonight. Daniel, thank you for the donation. Daniel says this Southwest Conference smack talk is getting ridiculous. Big 12 will be the most competitive conference in the country. No clear-cut favorite. Don't overlook Iowa State. Hunter Decker's a more talented defensive secondary. Well, I can tell you this, if you're an Iowa State fan, I know Josh Pate, who is one of the leading voices in college football these days from 24/7 Sports. I know he kind of said the same thing. Like, people think Iowa State's going to take a step back. He is not on board with that. He doesn't think it will happen. My response to that would just be like, okay, if we're talking about a step back, so we're talking about a step back from Iowa State was 7-6 last year. That would be the point that I would make. Like, they were 7-6. Do I think they're going to take a major step back from 7-6? No, probably not. But, a step back could still be, do I think Iowa State's going to be between 5-7 and 7-5? Probably so. That's generally where Matt Campbell is. But yeah, I don't think they're going to plummet and be a non-bowl team. I would imagine Iowa State would make a bowl game. But this will be a really interesting year for Matt Campbell. If Campbell rises up and goes, wins 8 or more games this year, it's a huge feather in his cap. And I think back to like Bill Snyder, early Bill Snyder, he got K-State to a bowl game in 93, won 9 games. Everybody thought it was going to fall off after that. Then the next year, he puts up another 9-win season. Then they lose the star quarterback from those 2 years. Everyone thinks it's going to fall off. They had an even better year. They finished ranked in the top 10. So once you start doing that, that's when you really assert yourself as an elite coach. And if Matt Campbell wants to shut me up from saying like, hey, this guy's a good coach, not an elite coach, like everybody seems to think he is, this would be the year to do it. Nick, good last question here because it is going to give me a chance to dovetail into the tease for what's coming up this week. Nick asks, is your interview with Bob Thompson anywhere where we could listen to it? Not yet, but as of tomorrow at 8 a.m., you will be able to listen to part 1, which focuses primarily on the Big 12. And as of 8 a.m. on Tuesday, you will be able to listen to part 2, which focuses more on the Pac-12. So just watch the channel for that. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you click the bell by that on the channel as well, because when you do that, you'll be alerted every time content drops, every time I go live, et cetera, et cetera. So just you have to be a little bit patient there, Nick, but I wanted to make sure and stagger it from the live show tonight. And I didn't fully wrap up editing it all until this morning, actually, when I woke up at the lake. I edited those 2 videos together at the lake because that's how dedicated I am. I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek. But yes, look for that this week. You'll see a lot with Bob Thompson, the former head of Fox Sports, the guy that Canzano has been quoting a bunch in some of this. You will get a chance to hear what he has to say about the Big 12 and the Pac-12 coming up this week. Okay, we got bots infiltrating all over the place here. No, 69mega.com. I do not want to find love, at least not at 69mega.com. So with that, I'm tired. Sunday night. This has been fun, though. Thank you for the smack talk. Thank you for everybody that's been here for donating. Hit me up on Twitter at JLKurtz, JLKURTZ. If you have anything, slide in those DMs. I'm pretty responsive there if you do. In the meantime, watch the videos this week. Trying to give you a little bit of extra content. Should be able to go live Wednesday. I'm going to be out of town this weekend. So likely, no live show Sunday. I don't really see any way that I can do that. I guess possibly I could do it from a hotel room in Portland. I don't know. To be determined, but in all likelihood, I'm going to take a step back this weekend. So we'll give you some more content. Justin wants to get one in at the buzzer here. Thank you for the donation, Justin. Justin says, UCF sucks. Then, now, and forever. Go Bulls. USF over UCF. We are taking that war on I-4 trophy back this year. Wow. All right, big smack talk there. South Florida, it's been tough sledding lately for South Florida. I don't know if I would be talking about just smack on UCF, but hey, you paid the money. I laid it out there for you. So now UCF fans have a reason to be fired up. Everybody's fired up. I think that means that football is getting close, people. Take care. Spread the word. Family, friends, whoever it is that loves college football, loves the Big 12, Facebook groups, social media, spread the word. Let's continue to grow this channel. And I appreciate you guys. I'll see you soon.